We are creatures. We will never be God. Thank God we will someday have glorified bodies, which will have some of the limitations removed, but we cannot fall foul to that first temptation of Adam and Eve in the garden, that if you eat this fruit, you will be like God.
Welcome to the Soundwords podcast. We are talking about issues in Christian ethics. And today, this week in our series, we are going to talk about the Christian and biotechnology. We're going to talk about the use of living organisms, cells, and biological processes to develop new products and technologies. It seems whenever man creates something, there's always ethical issues to discuss. And so to preface the conversation, we're going to talk about how can Christians think about biotechnology in a biblical way. We've brought in the expert. Dr. Mark Farnham is here to discuss with us today. Dr. Mark Farnham is professor at Lancaster Bible College, and he's the MA in Christian Apologetics program director there. He's also the founder of Apologetics for the Church. And listeners, you can find out more about his organization if you go to apologeticsforthechurch.org. Well, Dr. Farnham, we're very glad that you're here and joining us, and thank you for being here to talk about biotechnology.
Sure.
Yeah, Dr. Farnham, I'm excited for the conversation, and I come to it with a bit of trepidation, to be honest, because when Aaron started mentioning biology and organisms and biotechnology, I went back to like high school science class and college science and how difficult those subjects were for me. My brain doesn't work that way. I'm looking forward to the educational process here to sit under your teaching and your expertise. And maybe you can just help us start with a really simple question just to get out of the gate. What are some of the major ethical issues that biotechnology presents today?
Yeah, biotechnology is essentially the manipulation of living things, arguably for the good of human beings. So it's everything down to nanotechnology, which is a billionth of a meter, adjusting or editing cells and editing DNA, all the way up to things like prosthetic limbs that help people who've lost limbs to still function normally. So it's any application of technology to the human body. And there are incredible blessings that come with that, but also some incredibly difficult ethical challenges as well.
Yeah. And can you give us just maybe some more specific examples of innovations, maybe more recent innovations in biotechnology, maybe some that we'll discuss here in our podcast?
Yeah, some of the most significant and interesting aspects of biotechnology would be things like brain implants. Maybe you've heard of Elon Musk's implant that supposedly restores some brain function. It's also CRISPR, which is a gene editing technology which allows doctors and scientists to identify potential proclivities to disease and to go into a person's body and edit genes to eliminate that or to reduce the possibilities of that. And of course, it comes down to the question of what's called transhumanism and posthumanism, the idea that the next stage of evolution would be the merging of man and machine. And there are some in the world in high technology firms who are trying to find out how much can we merge man and machine in ways that should cause us as Christians incredible concern because of our understanding of how God made us and the importance of the human body.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've already spoken to this a little bit already. I mean, some of these technologies you're mentioning, though, we're not the experts here. We can already detect that line that is being walked between God's perfect design of his creation and people, image bearers, and this medical innovation and technology that is out there. So how should believers think broadly about these advances in medical innovation and technology, and then crossing an impermissible ethical line into moral compromise?
Yeah, it's a great question. I am a kidney transplant recipient, so I am the beneficiary of medical technology that allows us to do things that 60 years ago couldn't be done in human beings. And so I'm kept alive by that. Even the medicine I take, once you have a kidney transplant for the rest of your life, every 12 hours you have to take immunosuppressants that keep your body from rejecting that transplanted organ. Incredible blessings. Think about restored function for people with spinal cord injuries or accidents or loss of limb. So there is a lot of benefit to it, but we have to ask the question, where do we draw the line between what is commonly called therapy, the idea of fixing something or helping someone overcome a limitation with their bodies, and enhancement? How do we take otherwise normal people, normal bodies, and normal health, and we enhance it through the use of drugs or biotechnology? The question is, will we end up in a society of unenhanced and enhanced people, and will that become a new class distinction? Think of the impact that would have on everything from academics, a Neuralink brain implant that allows you to concentrate and access more of your brain power, or the idea of athletes that some are enhanced and are on medications and have abilities that an unenhanced person wouldn't have.
Interesting to think about. How does the doctrine of the image of God guide our view of biotechnology?
As Christians, our foundational view of man made in the image of God is the idea that who we are is determined by God, our identity is granted to us by God, and our bodies then are something good, but can be misused for evil. But the essential nature of the imago Dei, the image of God, is that we are made to know God, that we are made to reason rationally and morally, and a reminder that when God created the universe and created man, he said it was very good. And so we want to avoid the idea of Gnosticism where our bodies are an unfortunate, necessary part of our existence, but the real us is the inner part. That's actually Gnosticism, not a Christian value. Our bodies are so important in helping us understand who we are that we are resurrected in Christian theology, and we are given new bodies, glorified bodies, but bodies nonetheless. So we should not think of the body as Plato did, as a prison of the soul, but rather as an essential part of who we are, and a good part. And yet we have to have a good theology of the body to recognize what is acceptable and unacceptable to do to our bodies, and what is a way to accept and live with the limitations of our mortal bodies. Because as I grow older, I'm coming to realize more and more what those limitations are. And this is what motivates some people to try to figure out, how can we conquer death? For years, people in the transhumanism community have been trying to defeat death, to extend life indefinitely. And that simply is a rejection of the Christian idea that we are given 70 or 80 years by God, and we should accept that and recognize that what we long for in our bodies, a glorified state, a body without limitations and the curse of sin, is something we have to wait for in the next life when we are resurrected.
Yeah, amen. I wonder, Dr. Farnham, if you've had occasion to take the expertise that you have in bioethics and biotechnology and work that back into apologetic-oriented conversations with non-believers. Can you speak a little bit to that bridge between some of the matters you've just spoken on, thinking of life and death, being made in the image of God, and how that might even be a bridge to speaking to the unbeliever?
Yeah, it's something that is very important to many people. Many people think about death when they're forced to. Many other people try to avoid that. And the truth is, as Christians, we can have hope in suffering and death. We can have contentment in how God has made us, to accept that he has sovereignly made us the way we are, so that we can provide what the unbeliever often looks for, which is a sense of peace with life and with our bodies, in a way that our world constantly encourages us not to have peace, right? How much of the world today is pushing us to eat healthy so we can live longer? A very good thing. But the idea is we can avoid death, or an attempt by technology to keep us from dying. My daughter is an ICU nurse, and she says the saddest cases she sees in the ICU, which is the last attempt to save a life, is when someone is clearly dying and the family will not let go. This could be a frail 89-year-old grandmother who is clearly dying, and yet the family will insist that doctors use painful and difficult treatments to keep her alive, even if it's just for a few more days or a few more weeks. So the Christian faith gives us the foundation to accept death, to accept suffering, to seek to alleviate it when we can, but to embrace the fact that not all suffering can be alleviated. No death can be ultimately delayed indefinitely, and to come to peace with these things. About 20 years ago, my mom was in a car accident when she was in her early 60s, almost the same age I am now. And she lived for 5 days. And the doctors came to us and said, we can remove your mom from the hospital here, keep her alive in a heart and lung machine, and put her in a nursing home. And over time, she'll never wake up. She's brain dead, but over time, she'll catch pneumonia and die. Or we can remove her from life support now and let nature take its course. And I can tell you, having to make that decision for my mom, my sisters and I making that decision was one of the hardest things I've ever done. To realize as a Christian, I'm not obligated to stay alive at all costs. I can let nature take its course. I can remove my mom from life support, which is what we ultimately did, and to allow her to go to be with the Lord. And there's a peace there as a Christian to know where I'm going to be when I die, so I don't have to stay alive at all costs.
That's so comforting. Thank you for sharing that. And it resonates well with what you have there in the background and on the neon sign. Every believer confident. We do have confidence before God, not because we can fix all these problems, but because God has it planned out, and He, as you said, will resurrect our bodies. They'll be perfect. We'll be holy, and the effects of sin will be removed. We long for that day.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Farnham, can we talk about a specific issue in biotechnology, gene editing?
Sure.
Can we talk about what are the issues at stake, the ethical issues, and how should believers think about gene editing or enhancement?
It's a great point. Gene editing falls into the category of biotechnology that has to deal with a fine line between therapy and enhancement. For example, in an attempt to erase Down syndrome children, countries like Iceland and some others have effectively eliminated Down syndrome children being born, and they proclaim that as something positive, where Christian ethicists, including a friend of mine, Justin Hawkins, who grew up with a sister with Down syndrome, argues that our value should not be determined by our genomes, even things such as Down syndrome. So the question is, do we practice gene editing or support gene editing up to a certain point, and are there any principles that guide that? There are some who are proposing that eventually with gene editing, we can eliminate all disease. I think that's pretty impossible to actually accomplish. But can we support this kind of therapy that helps someone to avoid diseases? And I would say yes. Seeking to help a child avoid a disease that can be prevented through gene editing, I think, is a good idea. But even then, there's limits to that. How far do we go to seek to extend mortality? And I would say there is a place for preventing illnesses when possible, but not crossing the line into thinking, how can we create a better race of human beings or class of human beings? And the truth is that's above my pay grade as far as where that line actually falls. But I do think Christians can take advantage of biotechnology and medical advances if it is kept in this realm of how do we help someone have a healthier life without eliminating those who might have genetic problems or disabilities, to recognize they still have value, and not to resort to what many want to do, is to abort babies in the womb that might have certain diseases.
You know, another one along those lines, and this was probably the stuff of sci-fi movies many decades ago, but it seems like it's making its way more to the news now today, is cloning.
Yes.
What biblical principles guide that conversation about cloning?
That is so problematic. Now, we can clone animals. You may have heard of Dolly the sheep more than 20 years ago. That was tried, and there were some problems, but they have fixed a lot of the problems with cloning animals, and they can do that now. There are some long-term problems when you have an entire herd of sheep that are all cloned, from the same animal. That might present some problems. But the question of can we clone humans that can be brought to term? I'm pretty sure that we can clone embryos, but they don't live beyond 2 weeks. And there are many, many organizations around the world trying to clone human beings far enough to bring them to birth, but that raises significant questions. And this is, again, another sci-fi movie and sci-fi novel topic of what will it be like living in a cloned world. This is not the same as identical twins. This is a human manipulated attempt to reproduce people. Now, I'm a New England Patriots fan, so for 20 years we had Tom Brady helping us win Super Bowl after Super Bowl. And the new quarterback for the New England Patriots, Drake May, looks eerily similar to Tom Brady. And some have speculated that he might be a clone. He's obviously not. But what kind of world will we live in if you can be cloned? And here's one of the big questions: unwillingly. Someone finds a hair from your hairbrush, and or skin cells somehow from an accident, or someone slips up behind you and scrapes the skin off your arm and can clone you. Do we want to live in that kind of world? And obviously, that is where biotechnology crosses the boundaries of ethics, because we are then playing God. And this relates to even reproductive technology. The various forms of in vitro fertilization, surrogacy, other things like that. We have to ask the question, are the ethical implications, the long-term ethical implications, something that causes more problems than it's worth? And while I think in vitro fertilization can be done ethically, it has to, in order for a Christian to do that, they have to go against all the recommendations for how fertility clinics usually work. You have to create only enough embryos that you're actually going to seek to carry them all to term. But even that has ethical problems, because you might create, as I know friends of mine have, 4 embryos, and you have every intention of carrying those to term. And so far, they've had 3 of the 4 and intend to have the 4th. But what happens if after the first birth, the wife's health changes and she can no longer carry children? Now, as a Christian, you've created embryos who we believe are human beings and persons from the moment of conception, and now they are left frozen indefinitely. So all these ethical issues, we have to look beyond the immediate benefit, which it seems to provide, to the long-term implications, and that's where we should have a sense of caution about them.
Yeah, and go to God's word for answers. So thinking about all these things and thinking about the church now, how can pastors and churches help believers think critically and biblically about new medical technological possibilities?
It's a great question. I think we should be very careful in what we recommend or endorse carte blanche. I think it's important for pastors to do their research and be cautious about these new technologies. And there are good Christian ethicists writing on all these things, so there is information out there. But I think along with that is preaching and teaching a solid biblical anthropology. That is understanding who we are as people, resting in that, recognizing that there are therapies out there that can help people who have health issues or problems or limitations, but to encourage people not to follow the direction of the world, which is constant dissatisfaction with our bodies and constant dissatisfaction with the limits of creatureliness. We are creatures. We will never be God. Thank God we will someday have glorified bodies, which will have some of the limitations removed, but we cannot fall foul to that first temptation of Adam and Eve in the garden, that if you eat this fruit, you will be like God. We will never be divine in our essence. We'll always be creaturely. And learning to embrace that with our hope set on eternity with Christ and not on this life can help us through. So I've lived with chronic illness for 20 years now, and it has taken away so many of the abilities that I used to love and value when I was young and healthy. And yet I'm at peace about that because I know that whatever I miss in this lifetime, the things I like to do, I will have 100 times over when I'm with Christ. So learning to find contentment while also recognizing God gave us a world full of potential. And when that potential can be used well for the good of human beings and not for an attempt to transcend our creatureliness, we should be able to use those when they are ethical.
I really appreciate that. I mean, not just the professor's insights, but that personal insight that you've had with that, a man that's walked through chronic illness, had a mother who passed in some tragic circumstances, but also, you know, she's with the Lord and he's given you that eternal perspective. What you shared with me just with us reminds me of that quote from C.T. Studd where he says, "'Tis one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last." I think you've really emphasized that perspective for us today.
Good.
Yeah.
Dr. Farnham, we really appreciate your expertise and your insight today. And the final word, as always, in the Sound Words podcast goes to God and his word, where Paul says to Timothy in 2 Timothy 1:13, "Hold to the standard of sound words, which you have heard from me in the faith and love which are in Christ Jesus."
Thanks for listening.